A pleasure to meet all at last. And here we are once again at the Vlog-A-Thon, which of course we'll be following up with the likes of 2024. This time, of course, we'll be focusing on the second quarter out of 4 quarters that we intend to have. Much like when I've talked about 2023, there's a good amount of things worth talking about for 2024, just as well. So, following up with April 1st to June 30th of 2024, there of course were a couple of things worth mentioning here. Thyroiditis was of course one big thing that I had to deal with, especially throughout most of spring 2024. Going up to where I had talked about it previously, March 20th through the 31st, this was a time in which that the hyperthyroidism initially peaked to thyroid storm, and ended up getting so bad for me one night that I ended up suffering from violent tremors and had to be rushed to the emergency room that very morning on March 20th. So, throughout the rest of the month of March, my condition would be monitored for the next few weeks. I would have a follow-up meeting with my physician by April 10th of 2024, and further studies did eventually find that I was thankfully recovering from thyroiditis in a way that it wouldn't be any more dangerous than it was when thyroid storm came into my life. So I no longer had to worry about anything really, but I still kept on the regimens just as it normally would be. And when I say that I'm working on a regimen for thyroiditis, in the case in which that I'm referring to in this very moment, I had a number of dietary changes, lifestyle changes, as well as a lot of focus on getting the thyroiditis out of my system. But of course, it wouldn't come full circle until October of that year. I will talk a bit more about all that time in the future episodes of the Vlog-A-Thon, but anyways though, April 2024 would be just as much of a big point in the year as before. Something I hadn't mentioned in the last episode of the Vlog-A-Thon is that the first quarter of 2024 was also pretty significant because it was a leap year. And that's right, 2024 had a February 29th. It's something that pretty much happens every 4 years, the last time of which being in 2020. So, we probably have until 2028 for another leap year to occur. And when it does occur, we'll probably have more things worth talking about here. So, anyways though, April of 2024, apart from the things I previously mentioned, was big because of the solar eclipse. Yeah, so what do I have to say about it? April 8th, 2024? Well, unfortunately, out in this very deck, on that day in particular, 2 years ago, I actually made a video about the eclipse itself. It's a YouTube short that you can check out down below as I put a link in the description box. But of course, it ultimately wasn't nearly as big as I thought it would be. Mostly because we weren't at the exact point in which that the solar eclipse would be visible, but still. To see the moon block the sun for about an hour or so was pretty incredible, to say the least. It's something I might not ever get to see in the United States ever again. There of course was all the talk about the 2017 eclipse, which at the time was the last time that a solar eclipse entered the United States. But of course, we got to talk about most of the other things I did. There were a ton of games that I played throughout spring of 2024. Such cases included Transformers, Earthspark Expeditions, Skull Island, Rise of Kong, as well as Dave the Diver, Project Cars 3, Daymare 1994 Sandcastle, amongst many other titles in which that I played for the first time. And I will say, there's a lot of good picks we're talking about, and a lot of not so great picks that I was unfortunate enough to experience. But as I've discussed before, there of course were many other things worth mentioning, like my job and my life outside of work, the things I've done on YouTube. Of course, I hadn't done the Vlog-A-Thon as I originally planned on doing, which would have been in 2024, but because I was dealing with thyroiditis, amongst many other things that I have talked about already, as well as what I'm about to talk about, that pushed the schedule back to now in 2026, where I now finally have the time and ability to be able to talk about as much as I need for this season. So that's pretty much what it is here. However, if I had to pick one thing for spring 2024, apart from when I was able to recover from the hyperthyroidism side of thyroiditis by that time in May 2024, I'd have to talk about the fact that I visited the chocolate factory for the first time, which of course opened up in Menominee Falls, despite the fact that there were many other locations present. I also visited the Illinois Railway Museum for the first time ever. Yeah, so the first time I ever visited the Illinois Railway Museum. So I feel like enough is enough on that part. And we certainly can't forget one of the biggest things about my life that occurred in 2024. My 25th birthday. So, yeah, that is a good amount of stuff worth taking in here. And there were also a good amount of movies and a good amount of games. So, I probably won't go into all too much detail here because it looks like my battery is about to drain here. So, you can take my word for it or not, depending on who you are. But with all the stuff I've said here and the fact that thyroiditis unfortunately wouldn't be over just yet, I will of course talk a bit more about that stuff in due time. But if you want to see more, go down to my channel, then make sure to like, subscribe, comment, follow me wherever you can find me, and stay on the Hollywood side for more.